Hello and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm Heather Parsons, your host. I'm a serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and a business value strategist. I've spent years juggling business and family life while helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators about what actually moves the needle in their business. No fluff, no filler, just smart systems, strategies that work, and insights that you can put to use in your business right away. With that, let's dive right in. Today, we have Chris Hilgers on the show. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Heather. I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to have you here. For folks who may not be familiar with you yet, I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here as an entrepreneur.
So I started as an entrepreneur at a very young age. I grew up in family businesses, and then I spent a number of years in the corporate world, and I kind of came full circle about 15 years ago back to, I always had an entrepreneurial spirit and really kind of came back into it about 15 years ago and starting my business called Peak Franchising. Peak Franchising, what we do is that we work with franchise companies and we help people identify the right fit for their background, their skill set, what they desire their life to look like, etc. So we're placing people into businesses that, in addition to being in businesses ourselves, and so that's where, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy helping people.
I love that, and I love talking to entrepreneurs who are similar to me in the fact that you've spent time in the corporate world and then you transition into entrepreneurship. So, what made you finally make the decision that you wanted to do something different?
You know, I guess I had a taste of what it was like to be in my in the entrepreneurial world growing up, and I had some equity stakes there as well. But and then I had this path in the corporate world, and I kept looking at it and saying, "Gosh, is this really taking me where I want to go?" I mean, in fact, it's taking me in a lot of places where I didn't want to go. But it was it was one of those things where you look at it and you say, "Gosh, I really want to have more control over what I'm doing in my life," and I think that's the big thing because I had a good path before. However, this is a much better path, and honestly, 15 years into this business, I don't look back. I appreciate it, I learned a lot, and it helps me to help other people based on my experiences, et cetera. But this is something where, being in your own business, owning your own business, et cetera, really helps in terms of, you're building something and you're making your own key decisions. You're on a path. It's not always easy. In fact, there's a lot of really hard days. But I think to me that just that there's a gratification there when you're building something for yourself and your family and the people and helping the people around you.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think, as entrepreneurs and business owners, sometimes we lose sight of some of those things, especially around what we built our business for and where we're really trying to go with it. But I love being able to live and die by my own sword.
Hmm.
So go ahead.
No, I think to me too, one of the things that really helped me along the way was getting involved in a lot of personal development type programs. That I did that in the corporate world. I mean, I was big into sports growing up, and sports is a big part of my life, even now, et cetera. Just even from a spectator perspective, but then also I had a son that played in college sports and kind of followed all of that through. But to me, it's building, and you're always trying to get better. And I think that's the thing where, um, I think there's more upside. I just really think there's more upside when you're building something that's yours, and that's the key. I mean, a couple people that I really use as mentors is Tony Robbins and Darren Hardy. Tony Robbins talks about life happening for us, not to us. So there's all things happen along the way, and we just to me we don't always know what tomorrow has in store. But and another thing is that the quality of our life is based on our ability to deal with uncertainty. And I think the more we embrace not knowing everything what's going to happen tomorrow, it enhances and it really builds things. And I think that's where, again, very to me that there's a lot of upside that way.
Absolutely. And I think as entrepreneurs, a lot of time whenever I'm talking to folks, a lot of people think that they want to be an entrepreneur and be in business, but they're actually chasing more freedom than anything else. Kind of like what you're talking about, What do you think people are actually searching for as they go on this path to entrepreneurship and strike out on their own?
Well, I think a big thing is I think you hit it on freedom. I mean, everybody wants to, they're looking for a return on investment. They want freedom, fulfillment. I mean, what is it that really is going to make you happy? Because, I go back to the corporate world and I think about different jobs that I took because somebody else thought they were good for me, because they were grooming me to do something and be something. And then you take a step back and, you're 20 years into it, or 15, 20 years into it, and you think, gosh, where have I been? Yes, I appreciate where I've been, but where am I going? And I think it's about stories. What's our story been? What's it now? What do we want it to be? So I think that's a big deal. And I think that's where, when people think about what they want to do with themselves and how they get into, sometimes they like the idea of it, but they're afraid because it's just like, it's uncertainty. And that's the thing is that, to me, it's taking a step back and really understanding what is it that I want my life to look like. And it's all things, it's, a lot of times when we get interviewed, it's very politically correct, and we really don't get to know anybody because they're answering questions based on how they've been groomed to answer those questions and deal with it. And I think, to me, the first thing you have to do is be honest with yourself. What is it that I'm really after? Entrepreneurship is hard. Does it fulfill you, though? Is it going to be something that you feel like is going to make your life better? That's the big thing. And not every day is it going to be better, because we all know that there's you're climbing a mountain. Peak franchising is the name of my business, and I live in the mountains in Colorado. And so that's to me, you're walking, you're climbing, and some days you have to pause a little bit, and other days you take 2 steps forward, and another day a step back. But as long as you're continuing to plow forward, to me, that's the key, because we're either growing or we're going the other way, and we don't want to go the other way.
Absolutely. Progress or regress. There's nothing in the middle. Could
Nothing.
not agree more. So, you talk about helping people and getting them to understand their why. How important is that clarity when it comes to somebody either going into a franchise or building a business?
Well, I think the why is the most important thing. Why am I here in the first place? What am I? And you can dive into a lot of different directions with that. With why am I here? What is my why? I think the thing is that, again, it goes back to, what is it that you want? What is it? What are the things that are most important to you? You want more of the good stuff in life rather than the negative things. So how do I focus on things that are going to help to drive me? How am I going to do things that are going to make me better, and the people around me better too? Because to me, what's really important is that it's not just about, am I getting better, but what about the people that are around me? Am I influencing them in a positive way? Yeah, and so for me, when I'm thinking about that, and when people are looking at getting into entrepreneurship, why? First thing is it fulfilling? And is there somebody that's around me that's given me a perception that hey, this is something that I'd be interested in. I don't really know what it's all about, but maybe maybe I can learn more about that and see if I can dig into that. And that's a lot of times when I'm working with people, they maybe they've got the most perfect resume you could imagine, but then we're talking for a reason, because there's something that's missing. What is it that you don't have right now that you want to have? And to me, it all kind of goes back to fulfillment. How do I make sure that my life is the way I want it to be in all areas, personal, career, community, all, kind of all the above. And I think that's the key. And as we look at, becoming an entrepreneur is also something that, to me, it's not singularly focused. It's because a lot of times companies want you to be, just focused on them, and that's I understand that, but it doesn't have to be that way, and that's where people are, I don't think they dream enough, and I think that's the big thing is that, build upon something. We've got these mountains here. They're 14ers. You
Hmm.
climb and you get to a top of a 14er. It's a 10, 12-hour day up and down. You get to the top and you look around and you're like, gosh, this is incredible. I mean, this is along the way, though, you're wondering, why am I doing this? This is really a lot of work. And, maybe you skin your knee or you do something, and that's life. And it's just, but when you get there and you get to the peak and you look around and you're like, gosh, this is incredible. This is life changing. And I think that's what we're all after. And I think, to me, being an entrepreneur is somebody that's very, that's a thinker, that's always working to develop and find new paths and find new ways. I mean, one of the things that you'll find, like, Tony Robbins is pretty good with this in terms of, when you get stuck. Well, when you're stuck, why are you stuck? Big reason is that maybe you haven't been resourceful enough. Maybe there's limiting beliefs in what you might what you might be able to create. Another thing is maybe it's proximity. Maybe you're not around the right people. Think about when you think about your energy and where it's at, and maybe you find that your energy isn't that great on a certain day, and you're like, oh, well, what have I done? Who have I been around? Who have I spoken with? And where did I go? Those are all things that, to me, again, being an entrepreneur is not just about a business. It's about your life. And that's, are you entrepreneurial in your life? Are you creative in terms of problem solving and things like that? Those are all things that I look for with people. And I look, including when I look at myself in the mirror. That's what I'm striving for as well.
I love that. I love what you're saying there. And I talk to my kids about this a lot too,
Mhm.
because I think it's really important to have a solid why. And why are you doing things and why are you driving your life in that direction? Because I think about entrepreneurs and folks who are building purely for money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Money is super important, but just based on what I've seen working with clients and talking to entrepreneurs, it's not fulfilling like you're talking about. There's very little, money solves certain problems, but it doesn't fix those relationships. It doesn't make you grow as a person. It's just another tool in the tool belt,
Right.
though a necessary one. But if you don't have that purpose and that mindset right, it makes it really hard to grow.
The other thing I would add to that is that to the fact money is short term. The thing, like, my son, he played college baseball, and baseball is a sport that if you fail 7 out of 10 times, they call that a Hall of Famer, because that's some, when you hit three out of you hit 300, that's in Major League Baseball, you're a Hall of Famer, and some of the best that ever lived. And so the thing with him, for me, and I try to follow this with myself and with people I work with, is that it's not how we did today, it's how we respond to that. What happened? Did we go 4 for 4 today? Did we go 0 for 4 today? How are we going to respond to that to make tomorrow better? And I think that's the key, because it's just continuing. There's a book, it's called The Compound Effect, that Darren Hardy wrote, and he talks about the progress that you make on a daily basis, not just this year. It's 365 days this year, and just continuing to build on that and doing the little things that matter. And I think that's the thing. Even you hear the expression in sports. It's not what you do when the lights are on, when everybody sees you. It's what you're doing when the lights are off and nobody sees you, and you're working and building something. And I think that's so fundamental and important.
Absolutely. And another thing just to add to that really quickly, I was talking to somebody yesterday and they mentioned something that I thought was hilarious and so pertinent to entrepreneurship and so many other things. They were like, yeah, after about 3 or 4 years, you're a great instant success. No one sees the 3 or 4 years it takes you to
Yeah,
really get good at things, to do all the things when people are not looking. All they see is whenever you finally hit that home run, to use your baseball analogy, or they see when you're finally successful, or your podcast is growing, or your business is successful. They don't see all of the behind the scenes that takes
exactly.
place before you get there.
Well, we strike out sometimes too, right? I mean,
You
if you
do.
didn't strike out, you never went up to the plate to hit to go after it. That's the big thing too. When I talk to people about entrepreneurship and they're curious about it, And people are concerned about risk. And
Uh-huh.
you think about that, and it's just like, it's a risk to not do anything, much less go after something. And go after something, gosh, you might be successful. You never know. But if you don't go after it, you'll never know.
Right. Worst case scenario is you go back to the job and sit in the cubicle next to the guy you were sitting by before, you
Yeah,
know?
because he stayed there because he never went after it.
Right, exactly. So you've seen probably hundreds of businesses and entrepreneurs. What consistently separates the people who succeed from the people who struggle in business?
I think the big things that I see are people that have a desire. They understand their why. That's the first and foremost. They understand their why. There's a desire to grow. They're flexible in terms of understanding today was a tough day. How am I gonna respond to that tomorrow? And I think those are things that are really key. Surrounding yourself around the right people. Proximity is huge. I think that that's you model yourself a lot of times after somebody that's already been successful. Why do you don't have to recreate everything every time you do something. If there's somebody else that's already doing it and they're doing well with it, why wouldn't you follow some of the patterns that they're already following and that they're already doing. And you get a lot more done when you don't have to create everything all by yourself. you know and that's what, for me with franchising is I tell people the reason why you get into franchising is you still are a business owner, but the advantage is that you've got a business that's already has a platform in place that's proven. And so that's something that instead of starting out at I'll use baseball again, you can start out at second base instead of you know in the dugout, so to speak.
Right, exactly. Because if I understand correctly, with the franchising, you get a lot of those systems and processes already built in whenever you start the business. And as somebody who's bootstrapped a business, you have to figure out a lot of those things on your own, right? So it
Yeah,
definitely comes to a big benefit there. So do you think that most entrepreneurs underestimate how important those systems and processes really are to the
I
success of
think
the business?
Yeah, I think sometimes they underestimate them. I also think sometimes they overestimate them and it paralyzes them and they never do it in the first place because they say, I don't know if I can even do this. And so that's where it's so important to understand, that you're looking to partner with somebody. You own the business in your local area, they own the brand. And so you want to make sure that you're connecting with the right people. So I do think that, definitely when you align yourself with the right partner, with the right franchisor, you start many steps ahead than what you would if you're doing it by yourself. Now, one of the things I would tell you that's really important, and it's just like whether you're in the corporate world or you're having an independent business or you've got a franchise business, and I've been involved with all of them. The big thing is being able to benchmark and build, understand what the market is, understand what's happening out there, and then you can see in each case how you differentiate yourself from competition, because no matter what business you get into, there's always going to be competition, and you want to understand what the barriers to entry are, what are the key milestones to be successful. And so you need to see value, like within a franchise business. Franchise businesses are not for everybody. There's some people that are very, very independent, and maybe they can do this on their own. They just need in my mind, what I tell people that I work with is that I want you to have your eyes wide open to the opportunities that are out there. And I want you to see what it's going to take to scale that business and that keep that business sustainable. That holds true for each of the examples here, whether it be an independent business, a corporate opportunity, and also a franchise business. And it's really getting a feel for what's my story, what do I bring to the table that's different, or what do they bring to the table that's going to be different, that's going to be a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And then you think about, what do I want my life to look like? And does it align with having family, having hobbies and things like that? Those things are all, they're part of life, and we want more of the good stuff.
Absolutely. That's why we started our businesses in the first place.
Exactly. So yes, we always have to answer to somebody, but it sure is nice to be able to make some of those key decisions ourselves instead of having somebody else tell you that you're going to have to do it a certain way that you know that it's going to be a challenge.
For sure. Absolutely. You'd also talked a little bit about scaling a business.
Uh-huh.
So, what are some of the things that people think matter in growing a business and scaling that actually don't matter as much as they believe they do?
I think that people maybe they overestimate competition sometimes. Competition does matter. What matters more is how you compete in the marketplace and how you are designed to win. And I think sometimes when people will look at, gosh, there's 12 of these or there's 6 of these, it's just like, really, I mean, are you just going to be a me too? I don't think I didn't sign up to be in this world to be a me too. I mean, I'm unique and you're unique, and it's kind of so. I think that's the big thing when I hear that, and I people get very, I guess it's fear in a lot of ways, and sometimes maybe it's a lack of understanding, and so that's where for me, as I'm working with people and they say, okay, yes, there's definitely other businesses out there in this place. Usually I hit that ahead of time and I talk to them about the fact that you're going to run it. You're doing this not because you're creating a shiny new object or a new business that isn't out there for that nobody has ever thought of. You're doing this, especially with franchising. You're doing it because there's a system that's in place that works. You also are doing it with a specific company because they have a way of doing business. Whether it be a service business or a product, they have differentiation. You need to understand that. You need to appreciate what that is if you're going to move forward with that and if you're going to adopt that. If you don't see the value in it, then you shouldn't do it. Sometimes, um, sometimes it's just alignment. Maybe it's just because a company can be very successful, and I can be very successful along the way, but maybe we're not completely aligned in how that works, and so that's something too to me that's important. That sometimes they either overestimate or underestimate alignment. Alignment, you're partnering with somebody. It can be the best opportunity in the world. If it's not the right one for you or me, then we probably shouldn't pursue it. And so that's where. So to me, competition, alignment is another key thing. Partnerships with people. Again, it's proximity too. It's making sure that you're around the right people. That you're have got you're.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point too. I think that proximity drives a lot of things with entrepreneurs, right? So
Yeah.
I'll take for example being in masterminds. I'm a real estate gal as well, so masterminds are just part of the deal. It's whenever you first get started, it's great to be in a room where you're not the smartest and you're not the furthest along.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, continuing to do that really helps with a lot of that fear and uncertainty because while you have your problems in your business and as you're thinking about things, somebody has probably already been there. They've already been through a lawsuit. They've already had employee turnover or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. Those problems are something that are not insurmountable for the people that you're around because they've already been there. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why I think it's so important to be around other people who are doing similar things to what you are because for most people, your friends and family are not going to be the people who understand your business.
Right.
You might get lucky, but unless you come from a serious entrepreneur family, that's few and far between.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people, especially friends and family, they think they want to help you, but they're not helping you. They maybe they're trying to put walls around you so that you're quote unquote safe. Then it holds you back. And I think there's a difference between protecting you and holding you back. And I think that's something that's really important as people look to be entrepreneurs. There's people around you that love you and they want you to be in the best spot. But sometimes when you skin your knee, sometimes that was the best day of your life.
Right. You don't always see it in the moment, but you will
No.
later on.
Yeah, exactly.
You also touched on a little bit about fear and
Yeah.
how people would like certainty. So have you found that confidence And being able to move through that fear comes before taking action or after it?
Sometimes both. Sometimes both. I mean, we take action, and we screw up, and we realize that we did, and then how are we going to pivot? What are we going to do? And I think to me, the most successful people out there know how to pivot. They know, and they know how to deal with uncertainty. We all have a sense of fear or butterflies at times, and if you don't have it, it's not real, and you're not human. Because if somebody tells me, I'm good, there's no, I'm not concerned about anything. I don't see them doing it. I don't see them pursuing something. I see them just coming up with reasons at some point in time to not do it. And that's where, there's a fine line. It's good to have some fear because there's a sense of nervousness, and it's kind of like when the first time you go up on the high dive and you get up there and your friends and they're encouraging you to get up there and do it, and you go up there and it's all of a sudden you're there and you're like, oh gosh, that's a long way down. You did it, you jump, you're in the first time. Well, that wasn't such a big deal. That wasn't so bad. So then you go and you do it again and again. And so to me, that's, you got to jump, you have to jump in. You got to jump in at some point in time. I think that, people are at different levels of risk tolerance. And so for me, a big thing is really working to validate things. Because like I said earlier, you can have the best opportunity, the best company, the best business in the world. It needs to be in alignment with you. How do you get to that point? How do you get to the point where you're comfortable? I think about scalability and sustainability of a business. What's it going to take to build that business? Financial investment, people, blood, sweat, and tears. What are the key milestones? What are the things that happen? And when you get there, what does that look like? And then on the other side, how do we keep that alive? How do we keep that sustainable? And like in the franchise world, you've got these partners. Maybe the corporate world probably that way, and to some degree when you're in independent businesses as well. But you're looking for people, you're looking for a network that helps to support that. And I think I tell everybody that I work with that, especially the people that are coming out of the corporate world, this franchise world is this whole new network of people that you don't have right now. People that work together to help build you. So to me, you look at this, and there's a number of different ways, but validation of what an opportunity might be helps you to minimize the risk. Seeing that there's a group of people there that, from a support perspective, even sometimes competitors can be a support mechanism too, because you kind of, you're benchmarking them, you see what they're up to, and sometimes you want to do more of that, and sometimes you want to do less of what they're doing. But to me, it's always looking at things from a big picture perspective and understanding, again, coming back to your why. Why are we doing this in the first place? It's kind of like, when you're driving down the road and you've got a picture of where you're going, where you're going, you hit a bump. Yeah, you just keep going in that direction. If you don't know where you're going, if you don't have an idea of your why or a picture of where you're going, you get hit something, you go in the ditch, it's hard to get out. You get stuck. And we all get stuck at some point in time in our life. And when we have some of these foundations that are built, the people that we're leaning on, some of the things that we learned along the way to help move us out. When we have those things, it minimizes the risk. We still are going to have failures, but we don't have as many. And when we have them, we learn from them and we get better because of them.
Absolutely, for sure. And I do want to touch on one thing that you're talking about a little bit as folks come out of the corporate world and move more towards entrepreneurship. So I have seen a lot of times that folks come from the corporate world with this false sense of security. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, do you think as people move into owning a franchise and becoming an entrepreneur, that sense of false security kind of becomes a little bit more visible?
You can
Because
see that. Yeah, you definitely can see that because there's people that, it's the when you're in the corporate world, you can blame somebody else a lot of times. And guess what? When you have your own business, look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Yes, that maybe it's not your fault that today wasn't a good day, but guess what? You're still the one that has to turn the lights on the next day. And so I think that there's a sense of there's a security factor, thinking that you have a job, that you're secure. And maybe in some cases you are, but a lot of cases you're not. Then you go and you start your own path in the business world, your own business. And, honestly, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. Either you're successful or you're not. And so if you're struggling, and it's because maybe you relied on a key employee, maybe there was something that maybe there's something that happened in the community that changed the way your business needs to be done. You have to deal with that. You have to work through that. And it's in the more time that you spend on worrying about whose fault it is, the less time you have in solving problems and getting to the next level. And I think that's a big thing when you're in the corporate world. Yeah, I think a lot of times it does train you to kind of cover your backside yourself, but not worry about the next person. And again, that part of it shouldn't really matter. It's about what we're doing as a team. What is, as a business, and how are we doing, and how do we continue to grow? So
Absolutely. Because from my seat and working with entrepreneurs, that growth is the part that really is a differentiator. Because if you're sitting around blaming other people, blaming it's so and so's fault that I didn't get that client or whatever it is, you're not really focused on the right things.
hmm
Whether it's your why, whether it's, your growth as a person. And I love hearing about entrepreneurs who are constantly trying to seek more and trying to grow, because we don't want to get into just a grind. We don't want to just work for the sake of working all the time. There's a much bigger picture out there.
yeah.
So how do you see these founders and people you're working with really get to that level of success and growth as a person and as an entrepreneur?
Well, I mean, we're continuing to be more resourceful, because problems aren't always solved the same way. You need to be a problem solver. You need to be, to me, entrepreneur means somebody that's resourceful, somebody that's going after things, somebody that pivots when they get into a situation where they need to take a step back and they need to assess the situation and make a decision. That's, to me, entrepreneurs are not afraid to make decisions. To me, that's something in the corporate world. People get paralyzed because they think that they have to make the perfect decision. Well, guess what? Perfection doesn't exist. And so I think that's the other thing too to remember is being resourceful. Also, you need to give yourself some grace there in terms of none of us are perfect. We make the best decisions that we can based on the information that we have in front of us. If we're in a situation where we don't have everything set up right yet, that means that we're probably not being resourceful enough, and we're not. Maybe we need to dig a little bit deeper, etc. I'm not suggesting that you just make decisions for the sake of making decisions. I'm saying that, but don't be paralyzed by things, because sometimes you have to make a decision to get to the right answer. You're building, and sometimes you're going to make mistakes. You're going to spend money on things that aren't always a good return on investment. And I think that's one of the big things that I've learned through some of my mentors and colleagues is that not everything that we do can you measure as a return on investment. However, it doesn't mean that you forget about that. It just means that you have to go after things. You have to go after things in order to grow. And I think we can all sit back and legitimize not saying no to something, but how do you say yes?
Absolutely. And I think getting to that yes in business and learning to fail up is really important, because if you just sit there and you're paralyzed, you'll never learn and grow from those experiences.
No.
One other question that I have for you as well is, in business, we definitely want to make money,
Right.
right?
hmm
But what does a great business actually give somebody beyond money?
Well, I think that we talked about it before. Freedom. That's the thing. The two things that come up right away are financial and freedom. Because most people, think about, they want to be able to do what they want to do. They want to control their own days, and they want to control their calendars, and they want to control who they want to be around, et cetera. So that's a big deal. I think showing that we've had success in building something. I mean, helping people around you. To me, it's one thing for me to build my business. It's even more gratifying when I see people around me that I work with that I've been able to help be successful. It hurts when they struggle. It's just like, with your kids and stuff like that when they don't always they didn't get a ribbon that day. Whatever
Yeah.
you're doing. But that might have been a good day. But it's still one of those things where helping people around you, I think, is a big thing. Community is something that's huge, whether that be your local community or whatever type of communities that you're involved in. To me, when you're making the people around you better, that's gratifying, and I think that's where a lot of people feel that they're looking for something that helps to build them. They like people like to. They like, we talked about before when you're climbing to the 14ers, it feels so good to be able to build something. And I think that's once you do that, yeah, God, most people, they don't stop wanting that because it's just kind of like, hey, how can I do something? How can I do more? Yeah.
I love that. And that's a great reference as well. Because those, if I think about climbing a 14er, which I have done a couple of those myself, it's the planning, it's the preparation, it's the anticipation getting there. And then on the day that you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to, after you've slept in the truck all night, waiting to go,
Uh-huh.
now you're off doing something that's bigger than you.
Yes.
You're not, and you see as you get up there to the top of those peaks that how small you actually are and that there is something so much bigger than you out there.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's a lot of the same in business. You planning, preparation, really working to grow, and it grows you as a person. You're
Mhm.
not the same when you finish as you were when you started.
Well, think about that when you're climbing and you're on you're in some places you're not walking, you're crawling.
Right.
And it's just like, okay, so that's what you do in business. I mean, sometimes you're running, sometimes you're walking, sometimes you're crawling, sometimes you're just sitting and just resting. And so you can keep going again. But then when you get to that point, it's really exciting because you look around and then you think of, oh gosh, now I got to go, now I got to climb back down the mountain before it gets dark. But
Yep.
it's really cool because that's what we're doing. And you can use that analogy with a lot of different activities because we're always working towards playing in the game. And if we can play in the game and win in a game, boy, it's a great day. Even when we lose sometimes in a game, it can be a really great day too. It just means we go back and maybe we adjust, make some adjustments, and we keep going because that's the other thing too is that if everything was perfect and easy, then why are we doing it?
Exactly.
So
Well, today has been great. One last question before we wrap up. I would love to know, what is one secret that you wish you would have known starting out as an entrepreneur?
I think the secret that to me is the vision of what I want my life to look like. And I think that's the thing where especially when you're younger, you don't really know a lot of those things. Even when you get older, maybe you're naive to certain things. To me, um, the thing I wish that I had done more of early on was just the dreaming, and then saying, you know what, nothing's going to stop me. I can be particular about what it is that I want in my life. I don't have to settle. And I think that's the big thing as we do anything is having those dreams and pursuing them.
I love it. That's great. I've really enjoyed today's episode. So, if our listeners would like to connect with you and learn more about what you're working on, what's the best way for them to reach out?
The best way to reach out to me is if you go to www.peakfranchising.com. That's my website. Also, if you can go to this site, www.podcast.peakfranchising.com/CSS for this particular episode. And I've got a few different offers for you. One is a franchise investing readiness survey. Another is a free personal model and plan. Another is a franchise model fit quiz. And so what I would do, and you could do all three of them, but to me, I'd encourage you to reach out to look at these sites, and I'd love to schedule something with you and have a conversation. Just for me, the first part about it is what do you want life to look like? And then see how entrepreneurship and could that be through franchising if that's going to work for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris, and thank you to everybody for listening to C-Suite Secrets. If you have found today's conversation as valuable as I have, it would mean the world to me if you would hit that like and follow button. But most importantly, share this episode with somebody who's building a business. If you're at the point in your business where you're working hard and your business is growing, but you're not keeping as much cash as you should, or your numbers feel like a mystery, you need to check out our One Room. In our One Room, you get your own banker and CFO in your business to help you simplify your numbers, understand what's actually driving profit, and start making decisions like a financially minded CEO, not just reacting. If you want more info between episodes, join us on Facebook at C-Suite Insiders Group and come find me on Instagram at Heather Parsons Official. Until next time, keep growing and remember, you don't have to do this alone.